In our first reading, we read about God's power, which God expresses to Job. He speaks to Job about his power. Who did this? Who did that? He gives him a lesson about God himself, his almighty power, the power to control even the sea, the power to control everything, because he brought all these things into being by the power of his mouth. Here we see the power of God over nature. The description given is that God could speak to natural things, the same God that spoke them into being, and they obey. And what God said to Job was fully brought into fulfillment in our Lord Jesus Christ, in the gospel. God, Jesus and his Father are one. It is fulfilled in the gospel where Jesus spoke to the wind, the waves of the sea, and they obeyed. The responsorial psalm speaks to us about the power of God over nature. He spoke, he summons the gale, tossing the waves of the sea. And the responsorial psalm, we might say, is like a commentary on what happened in the gospel, and also what God spoke about in the first reading. It says, their souls melted away, just like the disciples were afraid. Their souls melted away in their distress. They cried to the Lord in their need, and he rescued them in their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. All the waves of the sea were hushed. It's almost like a commentary on what would happen in future, what Jesus would do. Stilling the storm to a whisper, and then their hearts that were filled with distress were calmed. In the second reading, St. Paul speaks about the love of Christ who died for us, so that we may no longer live for ourselves, but live for the one who died and was raised to life for us. The power of God is shown in his love. And his love is Jesus Christ, the perfect image of the unseen God, the face of God's love, the face of God's mercy, the face of God's compassion. So in all our readings today, we see the power of God over created things. We see also the power of God's love. This powerful God who has shown us love in his Son, who came to die for us, so that we may also learn how to die to ourselves in order to live for him. Our readings tell us that God is with us, as God spoke to Job. And also Jesus spoke to his disciples, and St. Paul tells us about this love of God. These readings tell us that God is with us. Even when we are facing all forms of turbulence and storm, when these threaten to capsize the ship or the boat in which we are traveling, the boat or the ship with which we travel through life, that God is with us. He has not abandoned us. Our hearts are troubled only because our memories are too short to recall that God had made a promise. He promised to be with us. Jesus said, I will be with you till the end of the age. Sometimes we forget our companion on the journey. Sometimes we believe he is sleeping, as the disciples wrongly believed, or that he is no longer powerful, as the psalmist says. What hurts me most is that God is no longer powerful. We forget his promise in Psalm 121 verse 3, that we will not let our foot to be moved. He who keeps us safe will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. So it is a wrong belief to hold that God is sleeping, that God is no longer powerful, that God has forgotten us. Our little faith is shown because we are focusing on the problems of the moment instead of focusing on God himself, who is greater than our problem. Problem of the moment cannot determine the total experience of the journey. It will not determine the possibility of getting to our destination. Problem of the moment is only for the moment. But our destination, the possibility of reaching our destination, is in the hands of God. And that's why we should trust him. God, who has loved us so much that he sent his only begotten Son. Jesus Christ is with us. And we often call upon him when we are in distress. But let us call upon him every time, not only when we find ourselves in a mess. Let us call upon him in our moments of trouble, and he will answer us. Call upon him in your confusion. Call upon him when your faith is failing. Call upon him when temptations or tempests rage. Remember that those who call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Our lack of faith comes when we no longer acknowledge the presence of the Lord in all we do, on all we experience. When God seems far away, when he seems to have abandoned us, let us call upon him in prayer. Let us call upon him in faith. If we do not pray, we will perish. If the disciples did not call upon him, they would have perished. If we call upon him not only once, but many times, as much as possible, as many times as possible, he will help us. So call upon him in days of trouble, as he says to us in Psalm 50, verse 15. Call upon me in the days of your trouble, and I will help you. Any delay in calling upon the name of the Lord is an invitation to disaster. Our mere strength is completely unreliable. That is why we must learn to call upon the name of the Lord in our distress. Nigeria is a sinking boat. Nigeria is a sinking ship. Those that are supposed to be leading us are even more confused than those they are leading. If we cannot help ourselves in any other way, let us learn to call upon the Lord, because the Lord is ready to save us. Sometimes we look at the church. The church seems to be a sinking ship or a sinking boat. We must call upon the name of the Lord so that the Lord will come to our rescue. If we call upon him, he will not forsake us. He will not reject us, as we sing in our song. When I call upon you, Lord, do not reject me, Lord. Do not forsake me, Lord, but answer my prayer. So we ask the Lord, as we call upon him, to come to our aid in our nation that is carrying an ugly look. We ask the Lord, as we call upon him, to come to help us in our church. Sometimes we see many things that are not right in the church. The Lord, who did not abandon his disciples in the boat, would also not abandon his church. He will not abandon our country, Nigeria. May the Lord help us in our distress and save us, so that our hearts will rejoice as the disciples did, through the same Christ our Lord.